right, welcome back to the Progressive Rehab and Strength podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rori Alter, head clinical coach here at Progressive Rehab and Strength, with the lovely coach and physical therapist, Dr. Alyssa Haveson. She works here at PRS with a lot of our lifters and has a heavy focus in competition. So if you're just tuning into the podcast, we're back for 2025, and we are doing a series on competition in powerlifting for the novice, intermediate, and advanced lifters. These episodes can be educational for every aspect of the athlete, whether you're a novice lifter, an advanced lifter, a coach, a physical therapist, whatever you are. These episodes are intended to provide meaningful information from the perspective of physical therapists, coaches, and competitive athletes, as well as Alyssa, her unique perspective here as uh, a competition official or referee on a international level. So in this episode, following up on our last episode that kind of discussed when should you do your first competition, should you do your first competition, kind of all the elements of when is the right time to do a competition. Um, we are following up talking about weight classes because in the sport of powerlifting, we don't just go in and compete against everybody that's there that day. First and foremost, we're competing against ourselves, which we talked about in the last episode. But there has to be a way to compare and compete against people in a fair way. And they do it based on sex, based on age, and based on weight. And so we're going to talk about weight classes because age is age, sex is sex, and weight can be very variable. So, um, Alyssa, what are weight classes and why are they important?
So really they're there to group you with people of similar weights so that somebody who weighs 110 pounds is not competing against somebody who weighs 300 pounds because obviously, well, not obvious, but most likely the person who weighs 300 pounds can lift more than the person who's 110.
Right.
And so weight classes are they really what we have are groupings of weights. You need to be less than or at the number of the weight class. So for example, 60 kilograms, you need to be 60 or below, yet above the weight class that is under it.
Right.
So, and I say it that way because I've had people say, like, thinking that they needed to be
Like if they were
over, like they needed
60.1
to
or
be, they thought,
61.
well,
Yeah.
some people thought, there was one person who thought that they needed to be over the weight class. I was like, no, that's the next weight class.
It's
Um,
like the sub 60, like
yeah.
you'll see a minus in front of it sometimes.
Yeah. So, they really, they're there to keep you competing against because we compete within weight classes for the most part, and you're competing, based off of what your total is, and keeps it relative, it keeps it fair so that you are competing against people that are about your size and weight.
Yeah, and I think the other element, outside of the person to person competition, we also have to think about like the convenience of it. People in a particular weight class or who are of similar weight will probably, for the most part, be lifting in a similar weight range. Someone who weighs 110 pounds is not going to be lifting this like nearly as much as the person who weighs 300 pounds. So if we put them in the same flight, the weight on the bar is going to be very, very different, and it can be challenging to keep up with all of that. So people in the same weight class tend to have similar loads on the bar. Obviously, there's going to be a difference if someone's a novice lifter and not as strong, obviously everyone's going to lift different weight, but it's going to be within the same kind of range. So weight classes help with that also. So do age categories. Like we're not really going to get into age now, but they'll put open on one day, juniors and masters on another day or in a different flight because the older you get, the younger you are, tend to lift a little bit less than the open category. So they'll group people by age and weight for convenience too. But really, the weight class comes down to who you're competitive against.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna chime in here because it does depend, as far as are they separating juniors or
Right, right,
masters, and, if you're at a meet that like a 2-day meet, you probably are gonna have and, it all has to do with the rules of how many lifters can be in a flight,
right.
but there are oftentimes that the juniors or the masters first of all, they could be registered and open as well. They're gonna be grouped with who they're competing against. So they're going to be we try to group flights in such a way that we're keeping groups of people who are competing against each other together. Even if that is a master's lifter who's also registered as open, who's in a weight like the weight class that's the rest of the flight is. Obviously, we
Mhm,
can break flights up however we need to. The goal is always to keep people together who are competing against each other. If there are more, for example, 60-kilogram lifters, then we can have in a flight, then we will break that up. But
mhm.
we're always trying to keep lifters who are competing against each other lifting in the same session and the same flight, regard, because
And
we don't
also
only compete against weight. It's like there are different ways that you can compete against another lifter.
right, exactly. So but should we confine ourselves to a weight class? Like, when is that important? Um, should we try and fit into a weight class, or should we show up at a competition at whatever weight we're at? And do you need
Yeah.
to be that number on the dot?
It depends. I think that a lot of people see stuff on social media, and I think that even a lot of new lifters have sort of had this like input of information from social media and talking about weight classes or body weight or cutting weight, and they almost see that as an aspect of competition. Like, okay, well, I need to cut weight. Not even this is the weight class I want to be in. It's like, all right, when do I start cutting weight? I've had that question. I'm like, what are you talking about? Why? Why? When you're doing your first meet. Um, so I think that there is this I don't know if it's like societal or within the culture of it that there's this expectation that you should always try to be lighter, always try to compete at a lighter weight than you are. And I generally disagree with that. But there are times when it is advantageous. So if it's your first meet, uh, I mean, listen, if you're within 1 or 2 pounds of the weight class and you absolutely want to be in that weight class, I'm not gonna crush dreams, but
Yeah, I mean,
it's
1 or 2 pounds, that's literally, like, not eating a massive meal the night before, or it's,
yeah.
like, not eating for 12 hours, something like that, not eating or drinking. But let me tell you, from personal experience, confining yourself to a weight class, cutting weight the week of a competition, or training heavier and doing a water cut, and I think we should define cutting weight, and I think we actually have this in our notes to define what cutting weight is versus a water cut. Um, neither are fun. But one is a lot worse than the other. Alyssa, have you ever what is your history? I don't know particular. Mine's bad. So mine not good. And I could share, I could do episodes plural on it. What you're laughing.
My history has traumatized me enough that I
Yeah.
will never have to do a water cut again in my
Yeah.
life because I would get my act together.
Yeah.
Really, ideally, we would be sort of cutting weight gradually leading into a meet if that has to happen. And a water cut really should not be, 5 or 10 pounds. Um,
I
if
have
we're gonna
attempted
get
an 11-pound water cut before.
yeah, that's too much.
Way
Um,
too much for a moderately sized human being.
but I think that one of the things that I think about when it comes to okay, does somebody want to be in a weight class? Obviously, there are implications to that when we are talking about more competitive lifters who are getting a qualifying total or who have qualified. I mean, at nationals, you need to weigh in the weight class that you're registered in. There are rules about changing your weight class and a deadline in which you can do so prior to the meet. But you then need to show up and weigh in the weight class that you're registered in order to compete, not as a guest. Um,
Well, let me ask you a
and
question, because at some competitions, if you do not weigh in, I mean, this does not happen at a local level, but at those higher level meets, if you show up and you weigh in at a weight that you're not of the class that you're not registered in, there's two things that can happen. One, you can't compete at all, and two, you lift as a guest.
so you can come back and try to make weight.
You have up until
Weigh-ins
30.
are an hour and a half,
Yeah.
so up until 30 minutes before, the competition starts. Um, and and if you cannot make weight, then you compete as a guest lifter. So your score really just doesn't count in competition. Um,
But at
so when it
but at, like, a world competition, I don't think you can.
I don't know what the I honestly don't remember,
I'm
because we're
pretty
not
sure
in
it's
IPF anymore.
yeah, so,
They
I'm pretty sure that because we had this with a lifter when I competed at bench press world championships in the IPF. They didn't make weight, and therefore, what they were not allowed to compete. Um,
and I think I've seen somebody under that circumstance compete as a guest lifter as well. So I'm not it's like been a few years. As
mm,
far as their rules about that.
mm,
Um, but when it comes to local level competition, new lifters who aren't looking to get a qualifying total, who are just getting comfortable on the platform, as a coach, one of the things I think about is the big picture. And I think that people get tunnel vision on this meet that's coming up and they want to be this weight. For some reason, we get married to a weight class. And and then they start focusing in on cutting weight or doing a water cut, which usually to some extent will affect performance rather than just
exactly.
going in, having had breakfast, you're hydrated. And, if it's somebody's first meet or second meet, I want to see them perform well, feel strong,
Mhm.
and go into the next meet and make progress. If you're somebody who may be competitive and may down the road be able to achieve a qualifying total in a weight class that's even a few pounds below where you walk around at, it's probably more advantageous to just compete at your body weight and make progress and get stronger there. And then once you are stronger, then start to bring your weight down a few pounds if that's what needs to happen rather than depleting yourself early on. Um, you know, so as a coach, I'm thinking about the big picture here, which is, hey, is it even going to make a difference what weight class you're in? What's the point? Why do you want to be in that weight class? Um, and and is it going to come down to, do you just want to be competitive at the local level, which at the end of the day comes down to who shows
There.
up at that meet?
Mhm.
Um, and it might not make you competitive because it all depends on who's there. There are some smaller weight classes that are lifting more than the weight class above them.
Mhm.
Um, so I always kind of ask like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, and I think that also, you have to think about, does it make sense to do a water cut? Okay, so let's define what cutting weight is versus a water I think that the language can be kind of confusing, where, like, cutting weight, um, is the steady loss of body weight over time, over a longer period of time than a weight cut or water cut, sorry, weight cut versus water cut. Um, and so it's more of like a chronic prolonged thing versus an acute thing just before the competition. Um, in most cases, I feel that acute water cuts are not ideal, except if you are a seasoned lifter, you have a very good handle on your nutrition and hydration, and you have a very small amount of weight to lose. Because I think more than anything, it's the hydration factor from an acute weight cut, acute water cut that
Mhm.
affects the person on um in competition. So generally you'll see like someone do a water cut into a competition and they'll have cramping or they'll have fatigue or they just really won't perform well because their muscles are depleted of sodium and um hydration, and you can fuel back up pretty quickly. But
Mhm.
with like a severe weight cut, water cut into a competition, you're really depleted. Like people go into saunas, they spit, they dehydrate for 24 hours, they pull out carbs and calories days before if they really have to lose a tremendous amount of weight. And I say tremendous amount of weight, I mean like more than 5 pounds. Even 5 pounds for a smaller individual is a lot. You have to think of what percentage that is of your body weight.
Mhm.
But I don't even like to give like a percentage of body weight that's like safe versus not safe. I really just think that in general, anything more than like 1 or 3 pounds for a female, 3 pounds, I think, for really like any female is a lot. And like 3 to 5 pounds for a male. And I think that even that is still a lot and can affect performance. Um, so there's the hydration element. But from a from a big picture or long-term planning standpoint, some people do like a weight cut starting like 12 weeks out. You shouldn't be, from our perspective, you shouldn't be cutting into the meat. It's really the best advice from us, at least, to train at the weight you're going to compete at, because training conditions should mimic competition conditions. You don't want your body status to be different in training than in your performance, because that just changes the game. It's like a different thing. Um, so even people who cut like 10 pounds in the 3 months leading up to competition, they have trouble.
Mhm.
So really, when you're looking to choose a weight class or change a weight class, it should be done with intention and with enough time to adapt to your new body weight and body physiology and mechanics, really, starting at like the 3 month mark, 3 months out. You shouldn't be cutting starting 3 months out. So, this is a conversation that we really have to have with our athletes or yourself, is if from a competitive standpoint, if I really want to change my weight class, how much time will I give myself? And it's different for everyone. Like if you just have to lose like a few pounds, that's one thing. But I would suggest doing that far enough advance of the competition so that you're comfortable and it's just like not overeating the night before or skipping breakfast until you weigh in. It shouldn't be it shouldn't leave the competition in the hands of your nutrition and hydration, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like people, like, I don't know, procrastinate, leave a little bit too much weight for the end, and I kinda
Mhm.
compare that to cramming for a test,
Mhm.
um, which is, in my opinion, easier to do if you're taking a written test than going to a powerlifting meet, um, and cramming your water cut in at the
Yeah.
last minute. Um, and, and I feel the same way about, talking about training at the weight you're gonna compete at. I know some people like to, I don't know, put on 5, 10 pounds. after a meet to train there, but then at some point it has to come off.
Mhm.
So we're now again, the situation is not mimicking your competition situation is not mimicking training. Um, and we're putting ourselves in a situation again where we need to cut weight.
Well,
What
I
I will
sorry, go on.
what I will say is that when someone comes down in body weight, so if they are decide they are going to lose 10 pounds over time, um, it is possible to lose weight and maintain and increase strength. It can get harder to do the more advanced you are.
Mhm.
So I do think it's important to adjust goals and make sure there are realistic ideas of what is going to happen on meet day and understanding that if you move down a weight class and lift the same weight that you lifted at a heavier weight class, it's technically progress. And I think what a lot
Yeah.
of people have trouble, I see a lot of people that get very focused on PRs. And if it's not a PR, they, had a bad meet or, and, and it is a PR. If you're 10 pounds lighter
Yep.
and you're lifting the same weight, it's a PR.
Yeah.
Uh, so I don't know. I think it's easier for us to look at people from the outside,
Mhm.
obviously,
Mhm.
than for them, and even ourselves, like taking a look at yourself and thinking, what does this actually look like, and assess the situation.
Well,
I think
I
it's
think
fun.
that's really important because a lot of people think that to keep getting stronger, you just have to get heavier. Um, and to keep getting two things. One, you to keep getting stronger, you should be gaining weight or you have to eat more. Um, that's not necessarily the case because you can add pounds to the bar and maintain your body weight. The other thing that people think in terms of getting stronger is that the load on the bar has to get heavier, which is the scenario that you just talked about is if we're getting smaller in weight, body weight, but our loads are staying the same and they're not affected by our drop in body weight over time, we have gotten stronger. We've been able to maintain the loads that we were lifting 10 pounds heavier. So exactly what you said, we're stronger because we're lighter and we're lifting the same loads. So I think that as coaches, we have to have those conversations with our athletes and help them define what their real goals are.
Mhm.
What they're saying, what does it actually mean? I want to get stronger. Okay, but you want to also be at a lower weight class. So, are you comfortable with losing weight but lifting the same loads? Because that's stronger, you know?
Yeah, it's really, a matter of relative strength versus
Exactly.
absolute strength.
Exactly.
And it's like, well,
Exactly.
when you say you want to get stronger, do you want to have more weight on the bar?
Right.
Because that isn't not the
Necessarily.
same necessarily the same thing.
Well, because
Uh,
we can even look at it in the other direction. Like when you were talking about the person who puts on weight in their quote unquote off season to get stronger, but they're actually like even for the like advanced lifter. I've had a lifter who I wasn't managing her nutrition, worked with this person for a very long time, and her bench was stalling. And she was like, I don't understand why my bench is stalling. I'm been like eating a lot. I put on 10 pounds. I'm like, well, I don't know what you're eating. I don't know how you're eating. Just because you're gaining weight doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to lift more weight. But also, they're an advanced masters lifter. So you also have to look at. I mean, there's just so many ways to look at getting stronger. Once we kind of reach our peak for strength development, um, in terms of age, like your mid 30s, there's this like, okay, so now if it's harder and harder and harder to get stronger. So if you're an advanced lifter and you're getting older, just eating more and gaining 10 pounds isn't the only thing that means you're getting stronger. I mean, sorry, that's not exactly what I meant. won't necessarily be the one factor that influences if the load on the bar goes up.
Yeah, and even if the load on the bar does go up, we might be seeing an increase in absolute strength, but it's quite possible that the relative strength
Right.
decrease. So by
Right.
gaining weight, by gaining 10 pounds and adding 2 pounds to your bench press, your bench is probably relatively weaker.
Yeah,
um,
I know. I'm like, it just sometimes it's like, come on. But I think, you have to look at like the age, the lifter, the like training age too, because like the older we get in training, like the more years we've lifted, the more advanced we are, the harder it is to add weight to the bar. So we have to make those decisions on, but sometimes it is necessary to gain weight. Like sometimes you've just become, especially with more advanced lifters who have put on such significant muscle mass, they outgrow a weight class. And it's very hard for them to stay in the lighter weight class because their body fat relative to their muscle mass is now much lower. And it's just gets really hard to stay. And like you've gone from what, 52 to 57?
oh, I was never 52.
Oh,
I
you
was
never
like
52.
57, 56. Like when I compete now, I compete as a 60 because I have for exactly the reason we're talking about. What's the point? I don't
Right.
necessarily care if I compete at nationals right now. I'm coaching so much at nationals. I really
Mhm.
don't want to.
Right. Yeah, I know. It's very
So
tiring.
my goal is to go and perform well and perform better than I did the last time. And I'm not, packing on a bunch of weight. I'm going in at a point where I'm comfortable and I'm not worried about my weight and it's nice and easy. The other thing that I was going to mention, when we're considering changes in body weight is there are implications like your body size changes. So
Mhm, mhm,
I do think that sometimes putting on weight can be putting on weight when it doesn't need to be put on. So the people who are packing on weight to get stronger can actually be detrimental for some. I mean, everybody is different, but for me, if I'm a little bit heavier, squat feels better, deadlift feels worse. Like
mhm.
it's just how you're moving, your body size, how
Yeah,
everything,
yeah.
and those are the sort of things that I think are fair to consider. And sometimes I'll have the conversation with people of like, well, where are you going to perform best? Are
Mhm,
you going to always feel like that you're trying to stay lighter? You're always watching your intake. You're always a little depleted and probably not eating enough.
mhm,
Are you able to make the progress that you want to make there, or would you actually perform better and make more progress over time if you were 5 pounds heavier? And I do think that, but again, I think a lot of this has to do with the psychological implications of weight classes, and people feel like they just have
mhm,
to be in a weight class. And if you really take a step back and think about why,
mhm.
there's not always a good reason for it.
Yeah, and I think that, um, if you are gonna make a weight class change, give yourself like 2 years. It's, you and also like really reassess, are you able to like don't straight diet for like 2 years straight. Like give yourself breaks. There's going to be bumps in the road. Um and also if you're really struggling and you keep kind of like falling out of it, just the psychology of dieting, especially for weight class athletes, is very challenging. And it can lead to disordered eating. It can lead to anxiety. It can lead to depression. It can lead to trouble inside and outside of training and work, life, all those things. So they're really, and it's not why we're here. That's not why you started lifting. I always say to my athletes, why remember why you picked up the barbell for the first time. Remember what your goals were or your reason for stepping under the bar and learning how to lift. It was not to do a powerlifting competition, And also we don't make well, now you can make money in the like pro circuit, but um there's really it's not a professional sport. There's like it's not the NFL, it's not the NBA, it's not even an Olympic sport, and we all have like work and family outside of training and competition. So at the end of the day, we should have the goal of also staying healthy outside of barbell training. And barbell training should support us being healthy. Um, we should look at the big picture, remember our first why and our big why. And just remember that your body weight is not really important if you're um, doing this for fun.
And one thing I want to add, because I think that this option is overlooked if somebody wants to come down a weight class and do it over a long period of time. You don't have to go from like, doing a meet in one weight class and then the next one you get to,
Right.
it's in the weight class below. You can gradually weigh in lighter
Yeah.
in that you could forget the weight classes altogether and weigh in a couple kilos lighter every time if you're coming down, whatever, if you want to lose 10 or 20 pounds over a couple of years. And for some people that is appropriate for even health reasons, depending on where someone's starting.
Yeah.
Um,
I
you
definitely think
know,
I mean, you've been saying this since the beginning of the podcast episode. It's like just because the weight class is 60 doesn't mean you have to weigh 60. What's the one under it? 56?
Yeah, and just because it's 60 doesn't mean that you have to weigh, being heavier or lighter, because I do think people see it as, well, if I'm heavier in the weight class, I'll be more competitive because I can lift more. Or they see it as, well, if I'm lighter and I just lift the same amount as
Right.
somebody else, just like
Just
show
lift.
up and,
Yeah.
if you've got to be in the weight class, just be in it.
But
Don't
also don't
fixate on where you're
but
at in it.
what you're saying is it's like okay, so it's the two weight classes we're using 60 and 56 for this example, right? If you're 57 and you're like on cruise control with your diet for switching weight class, they're just or 58, 58. Okay, you're smack in the middle, right? Just show up and do a competition at 58 because you're just doing the competition to like show up and stay what is the word I'm looking for? Stay like in what is the word I'm looking for? Not get
But
rusty. The opposite of rusty.
yes, and the
Stay
habit of
conditioned for
competing. Yeah.
competition, like something what I don't know what the word is I'm trying not get
Keep
rusty.
doing the thing.
Stay lubed.
So, but then you could do another meet at 57
Yeah.
and then get down to it doesn't have to be, because I think that what happens is you look at this, I've got to lose. So, I said a couple kilos at a time. I was thinking if we've got like somebody who's losing a larger amount of weight,
Right.
but if we're talking about, 60 and 56 and
But
you
I
want to
mean,
get
it's
into the
hard. I mean, think
56.
it's a relative thing,
Yeah, I mean
like
that's
that's
still.
why we have more weight classes than we used to in the past.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a 60-kilogram lifter who's 60 kilograms, getting to 56 can feel like it's a very long ways away. And I think that where people like get off track is they get their sights set on, I've got to be 56 next time I compete. No, you don't.
Be whatever weight you are
Actually.
on that day.
And then yeah, sure. Okay, if you're trying to get a qualifying total, that's another conversation altogether. And is that qualifying total within reach? And have you responsibly lost some weight in a way that is going to set you up to be successful on meet day with that qualifying total that's in reach? Because what I see a lot of people do is they get these goals in mind that are a little bit out of reach and they're chasing numbers or they're chasing weight classes and they fall short and they do it over and over and over again. And then you see a meet history of, well, if you haven't made progress for 2 years because you were always cutting weight, you were always chasing these numbers and you miss them every time because something's wrong.
Mhm.
Um, and then we have to take a different approach. That's
Well, you don't see it with our lifters.
yeah,
Thankfully.
because I'm like, we're not doing that.
No. Okay, so we're gonna take a break here because we have so many more things to talk about, including strategy, which we will get to in I think the next episode. So just kind of recap what we talked about today. The big the big thing, the big takeaway is acute weight cuts, not really ideal. If you do want to change a weight class, do it over a prolonged period of time so that you're training at the body status that you will be competing at. And really, unless there is some higher stake that you're trying to go for, qualifying in a particular weight class to get to nationals or to be competitive or in prime time or like get some higher level goal, don't worry about your weight on competition day. Don't starve yourself, don't dehydrate yourself. Just show up and do the best that you can and keep making progress. And stay injury free. You know, these acute weight cut situations or losing a lot of weight really fast going into a competition can set you up for injuries. And we have a whole podcast coming up on why people, not our clients, hopefully, tend to get injured surrounding the competition. In the peak to the process of competing or the week after or 2 weeks after a competition, why do we see people get injured? Again, not our clients hopefully. But it happens. And we'll talk about why and weight manipulation, depletion, and all that kind of stuff can play into that. So, if we want to try and avoid being injured, which is something that we take seriously here at PRS, weight manipulation and nutrition plays a big role in that. So, stay healthy, stay hydrated, get your protein in, get your calories in, and don't aggressively gain or aggressively lose weight. Yeah?
I agree with all that.
All right. If you've got questions, we do not that I want to support like a very aggressive acute weight cut leading into a competition or water cut into a competition. We do have a free download on cutting like 1 or 2 pounds, which is something that we're comfortable with um, as coaches when it's the right scenario. So we do have a free download for that. It'll be linked in the show notes. It's like literally 1 to 2 pounds. Like you should I don't want to support I don't know you. I don't know your your training status, your injury history, your nutrition status. I don't really want to say like go ahead and do a water cut. But if you want to cut 1 to 2 pounds the week of the competition, I cannot be responsible for the outcome of the competition. We do have a PDF that you can download on that, linked in the show notes. Um, we have a free Facebook group, the Secret Society Barbell Mastery, where we do form checks, we answer questions, we do Q&A sessions. It's free. Join us. We can answer your questions in there, discuss topics that questions you have on the podcast, whatever you want to talk about in there. And you can check out our website, progressiverehabandstrength.com, and you can check us out on Instagram at Pro Rehab Strength and at Alyssa Hope Alyssa with a Y. I like never specify that. It's Alyssa with a Y. Alyssa Hope underscore PRS and Rory with an I. Megan without an H underscore PRS.
Yikes.
Those are our Instagram handles. So we'll see you around and we will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.